Hey guys, I got cut off at part one. Hope you don't mind the rambling. You don't have to listen. Please don't listen to this if you don't want to. I'm a nerd and I like it, but hey, not everybody likes this kind of heavy stuff. We're talking about reductionism. I think that's where I got cut off. Um, so yeah, the bias of modern science um, is in a way a good instrument. It hasn't been hindering science yet. Um, The claim of science is that the only thing that is real is the material, observable universe, because it is the only thing um, that is A, observable, and B, seems to be able to explain a lot of things about the universe without needing any kind of otherness. Now, this isn't entirely true. We still don't understand consciousness at all. I mean, let me clarify that statement. We don't understand consciousness, what it is, and where it is at all. We still can't find it. We can find correlatives, exterior correlatives to some aspects of consciousness. For instance, the phenomena of experiencing emotion, where thought happens, but the direct perceiving of awareness and I-ness, mystery. Now, empirical science believes for good reasons that eventually it will be discovered in the brain. And I don't know about that. I think that when they do discover this, it may be something completely different. And by the time they do discover this, we may understand reality to be not this physical thing. We still may be able to observe it, but it will no longer be defined as the cold physical universe which objects exist and interact, you know, material stuff like that. It's real, but to an extent. I mean, we're finding in modern physics a lot of new changing paradigms that question that fundamental assumptions of empirical science. Not necessarily not using the tools of empirical science, but question the assumptions. Perhaps reality isn't ultimately the observable physical universe. Perhaps the physical universe is a hologram. And if you read a lot of some very interesting modern findings in the past couple months, they keep coming to this weird conclusion: reality is a hologram. We're living in a holographic universe. There's no such thing as matter. There's only streams and particles, streams and waves and potentials. It means it's real, but real in a different sense, a very different sense than a physical bare world. That is sort of a bias from, where we are. So, to conclude very quickly about this, it's not that science is wrong in any case, it is just that it has found a method that has worked very well over time. Empirical research, reductionist research, everything can be physically explained and physically described exhaustively. And to some degree, they are partially correct. They've been right about it for a very long time. They've described a lot of stuff. So they think there's plenty of reason to continue to assume that eventually everything will be described this way. Because we've already found so much. There's a wealth of data. I think there'll be a critical point, where very, very fundamental assumptions about the universe are going to be questioned, and that's already happening. We're already on the edge of this shift. But to describe a few different thinkers about this, Daniel Dennett, for instance, he wrote a book quintessentially called Consciousness Explained. Um, and he describes a debate between the Mysteriums and the reductionists. And this is, of course, the reductionists being the scientists who believe that consciousness will eventually be able to explain in completely physical terms, and the Mysterium saying, no, it's not. And to a degree, they're both right. Reductionists are right in the sense that science will eventually be able to describe consciousness. But the Mysteriums are right in a sense because consciousness won't be explained the way reductionists want to explain it. They're going to have to explain it in a very interesting way. Um, that may involve quantum physics. Maybe consciousness is some kind of wave of potentiality. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, we're not up to that point yet. But the point is, both definitions will have to be redefined, and something new will come about. So, we have many different thinkers: Daniel Dennett, Steven Pinker, Sam Harris. A lot of people are talking about consciousness and trying to understand it through many different mediums. But ultimately, I don't believe it will be able to be reduced to what we currently know. because if the history of science is any indication, there's always going to be major shifts in its understanding that radically transform primary definitions, and we're reaching that critical point. I guess you could say it's this evolution of science, as the evolution of our own understanding grows. Now, there are people who are trying to integrate these two different aspects, the exterior and the interior, consciousness as we experience it, and the physical observable world. Modern approaches to integrative views. Ken Wilber, Transpersonal Psychology. What he's basically stating is that, as we were mentioning before about the self and psychology, the self does exist to a relative degree. Now, what does that mean? It means the self kind of exists. It exists as an illusion, as the manifest world, as they say in Buddhism, but it exists more as almost a flowering in a greater forest, if you could say. Now, it goes through various stages. The map is not the territory, but if we have a good map, we may be able to nurture this growth so it reaches its peak experiences, its peak stages of development, which is what he calls transpersonal development, where the ego is at first non-differentiated. There is no ego. To an ego, as we grow up, we have a sense of self. And then to a transpersonal ego, an ego that begins to dissolve its boundaries again, as it had when it was a child, except in a different way, of course, as an adult, which makes it very different. So the self and other boundaries sort of dissolves, and many new experiences are open to the individual at this point that may have never been open before, which, of course, empathy, perhaps some things that are considered paranormal, that cannot necessarily be proven right now, but documentation of people's inner experiences correlates. So, transpersonal psychology. This tries to integrate both views of East and West. That subject-object duality is an illusion, but also that it still does exist as illusion. It still exists as part of the manifest world. So, another thinker, contemplative science, as what William James was describing as radical empiricism, as what B. Alan Wallace is describing as needing an internal psychology, an internal science like psychology to help explore the nature of self and the universe. And the best way to do this, of course, is the practice of meditation, because meditation is probably one of the most finely tuned inner instruments to create as objectively as possible just mindfulness, bare attention, without bringing in attitudes and bias, as much as possible at least. And that can be very fruitful into not only human psychology, but also deeper modes of reality. So, to conclude, I guess we could say I would like to end with the Buddhist concept of emptiness, which states simply, emptiness is fullness, fullness is emptiness. Now, what does this mean? It means nothing exists without something else. Everything exists in relation to other. So nothing is an inherent being, including us. We cannot be without other. And that is a very, very fundamental and important thing, and it implies an interconnection between all things. And all things are only themselves when the rest of the world exists, or the universe. So we are all inherently empty. There is no inherent self in you or I. There is only a self when I come in contact with you. Just as they're saying in quantum physics, there is only a particle when it comes in contact with another particle. This is a fundamental interdependence in reality. Everything is empty in the sense that nothing has intrinsic value. Everything is value when it comes together. And I guess I would like to end on that note as an alternative view to the universe and our interconnection. Thank you for listening.